most people have some sense of what blockchain is and crypto and Bitcoin, or at least, some idea, or from a starting point, I think we could kind of breeze over that and maybe go deeper on, NFTs and Web3 and some things, metaverse and things that really haven't been covered as much. But just as a starting point, guys, I wondered if you could each just chime in a little bit of, with the perspective of the average real estate agent or broker, what's and specific to blockchain, crypto, Bitcoin, that arena, what do you think are the key things to keep in mind, or know about, or, help with definition, if anything else?
Matt, I'd like to start. So what I would say, first of all, is the average realtor in America does not need to be an expert in blockchain or in cryptocurrency, but they need to know about it and know somebody who is. So I liken it to, all of the tools that you use, whether it's the MLS or CMAs, anything that you're doing for lead gen. All of those are tools that you have in a Swiss Army knife, and using crypto is just one more. And maybe you're not an expert on how to use it, but you know who is, or tools that can help make that happen. So there's absolutely value in it, because these are always going to be higher dollar transactions, and you don't want to walk away from that money.
Awesome.
I would agree with that too. I think this goes beyond real estate, right? And I'm sure, like, Rob will chime in on this as this becomes regulated, and it's going to be regulated at some point, right? Especially the crypto the crypto, Bitcoin, whatever end of things. It behooves you to get your team together now and get knowledgeable people, both in real estate and outside of real estate, to help you guide your clients to this. Because as real estate, and seeing it from the outside looking in, as real estate purchases become more and more of a upper bracket, upper crust kind of transaction, you're going to see more and more of these elements entering into the conversation on just a straight up purchase, not just like the blockchain conversation, which from the MLS side intrigues me, but from the straight up purchase end of things. That's where my money is right now. How do you help me out?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And really, any technology, including the technology we're talking about today, you have to think about what's the unique problem you're trying to solve with that technology. You don't just throw something new at something new just because you want to do it, unless you're doing it for educational purposes to learn more about it. But you have to make sure you understand, like, what am I really trying to solve, and how does this do it that nothing else can do better?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to echo everybody, except for I don't know when regulations come in, Nobu. I'm sure it's on its way. Interestingly enough, Russia appears to be the first country that's going to really do this. They're supposed to announce something like this week, next week. But, SEC, CFTC, they're all fighting over who gets to regulate crypto and blockchain and what's going to happen. We'll see. But I agree with Chris. I mean, at this point, that's one of the things I feel like it's gets lost in the hype. Is this technology slower and more expensive, right, than existing sort of computer database technology? So you really have to figure out, why do I need this? Why do I need to use this? And I also agree with Liz. I think for the average real estate agent, you really, I think, trying to pay too much attention to this, unless you're just interested because you just like NFTs and you're a crypto degen DeFi guy like me, then, yeah, absolutely do it for that. But for real estate, I don't see a whole lot of application right now. But it's worth thinking about some of the big concepts and big sort of principles and how it might change things over the next 3 to 5 years. So
yeah, when I think so, from the man on the street, agent on the street perspective, Nobu was talking before the call about a transaction last year where the buyer came with crypto. Liz talking about the need to have an expert to tap, and from that perspective, I think you need to have that much understanding. Like, this might happen. You might get a buyer come this way, or, who's the expert you're going to reach out to. When Liz was describing that, I was thinking about 1031 exchange. Like, almost nobody knows that much about that. Every once in a while you'll do one, and first thing you do is like call the 1031 dude, and ask all the questions, But when you guys were just talking through on blockchain, I thought, yeah, it's one thing to skip over and say everybody has some sense of what a blockchain is, but there are lots of different pieces here, right? What Chris is thinking about doing with blockchain is not at all what I'm thinking about doing with it, or or something in title that might be outside the realm of any of our approach. So can you guys each touch just on blockchain specifically on what you think maybe is the most interesting or first to touch down in real estate might be?
So Rob brought up a good point. Is blockchain more expensive and more complicated than current databases? 100%. Absolutely it is. However, the tools, as they all are in all technology, get better, faster, cheaper every single day. So I saw coming in lots of people here from Chicago. While this says Miami, I actually live in Chicago. Cook County actually piloted the first title on blockchain in 2016. So John Merkovic, this really forward-thinking guy, put together a pilot program because he basically said, look, our databases are so terrible that you could slip one of the assistant recorders $400 and have them put in a quitclaim deed. And if you aren't paying attention, something bad can happen. And while it would probably get fixed, no one wants to unwind that. It's like any other identity theft. It's a mess. So blockchain, which is, just to educate people, an immutable database, which means there is always a list of every transaction that's happened. And the only thing that can change it is to change something back, is to show all of the changes. It has implications with size, et cetera. But having that for something that is so critical, like property title, I think it just makes sense. But where we're going to start to see pushback, and we're already seeing this, is lobbyists. The lobbyists for the title companies, there's a lot of money on the line here for title and title insurance. So, is this going to be for the greater good? And then we can talk about DeFi and we'll go down that rabbit hole.
Right.
And there's some amazing stuff that's going on in the chat right now too. And I want to pick up on one of them, which actually ties back into what Liz just mentioned with Chicago. From the MLS side of things, we're really interested in the concept of identity and how that ties to the blockchain. And actually back in 2018, we did a prototype, MRED did, around an identity around licensing. So how could we get all of the various bodies that would be tied into licensing, whether that be the state, it'd be the local board, the brokerage, the MLS, and how could we come together to verify that someone should have access to all the things they should have access to? And this was one of those cases where we actually felt we could speed up the process, because while the blockchain technology itself was slow, it was still faster than all those different entities together trying to get that done. And we had a really successful prototype. It worked the way we wanted it to, and we shelved it because at the time we were just like, there's no way we're going to be able to get all these other entities to get involved in something like this. But the idea, I think, is still really interesting. And even RISO, the Real Estate Standards Organization, still comes back to that identity piece today when they look at things like a unique licensee identifier, where they're trying to understand, as an agent working across multiple markets, who is this person? Is it the same person going from market to market? And how can we uniquely make sure we understand who that person is? So there's some really interesting things in blockchain and identity and licensing that I see MLSs continue to pay attention to and work on there.
That's where I think is a good advantage right now. This is such an early on technology, and I think there's never been a time, if from the leadership perspective, as I sit here on the line between everyday sales and association nonprofit work. Now's the time for that chief nerd officer to step up and have 2 to 3 years worth of time into this, and to talk with you, Liz, and with you, Chris, on how the real estate agent, the realtor, can stay in the middle of all this from an advisory role. And so on. I see so many advantages for an organization like RISO to step in and organize that chaos, because that's it right now. I mean, in a word, to me, it's just absolute chaos on what is a standard, what isn't a standard, and a rush into that standard, I think, would be part of a leadership, from the human element to what is a very non-human way to transact going forward, which is exciting to me. I think it's a really good way to inject some humanity into this. Because there's going to be those folks that are out there. I mean, we're already in a doom and gloom situation now where, oh man, realtors are going to go away. Real estate people are going to go away. It's like, no, it's just, you're just going to have another clip in the ammo belt to have to talk about right now.
Yeah. Rob?
So, I mean, I think before we get into some of the theoretical high level stuff, I'm just looking at the chat. One of the big questions that I think, and I know a lot of folks were interested in, using crypto to buy houses. And I know, Nobu, you have some direct experience with that. Maybe let's address some of the top, basic questions. So I'll start off by saying, I don't think I don't think anyone is going to successfully use actual crypto to buy houses. And the ones who have in the past as a test are likely regretting it. Just as an example, when Proppy sold the apartment in Kiev, right, back in 2018, 2019, I don't know, it was fairly recent. The buyer paid 96 ETH, right? And at the time, that was worth $96,000. Today, that's worth 384,000. So I'm kind of thinking the buyer who paid 96 ETH for the apartment is kicking himself. Conversely, there's too much volatility with most of this cryptocurrency. Most sellers aren't going to just accept Dogecoin or whatever, right? So what we're seeing, and all of the actions we have seen to date that I'm aware of, and maybe if you guys know differently, tell me, is people will convert their crypto into USDC, they'll convert to USDT, they'll convert to a stable coin, and then do it that way. Look, so when people talk about a lot of this knowledge, understanding, to some extent, it's just understanding, look, you just need to convert your digital assets into a stable coin currency that the seller and the buyer both have some idea what the price actually is. I just want to put that out there and see if you guys have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened in my wife's transaction. I mean, it's like, one, it's like, I can't believe it made it through snuff to even put like 30 Bitcoin in the actual purchase agreement. I'm like, that goes to show you how far we have to go just on advising our clients, right? But you're exactly right, Rob. It's like cash that as soon as humanly possible, and then see what you got, and then deposit it. Proof of funds is just like treat it as every cash deal. And then Liz brought up, like, what are the tax ramifications of that, right? So this is where we're at right now. This weird transitionary phase of, okay, we got all these things that consumers are doing and they can do now, right, speculate on their own, versus what they have to do in order to transact on a home traditionally.
And in the chat, we're seeing some comments about that. And you're exactly right. There are going to be tax consequences. When you do that conversion, chances are there may be capital gains, there may be things happening. So I think from the working realtor's perspective, don't get distracted by Bitcoin, ETH, crypto, all this hype. Just imagine that the buyer has a lot of gold. They have bricks of gold, right? Very few sellers are going to give you their home in exchange for bricks of gold. Chances are they're going to have to go sell that gold or borrow against it or do whatever and generate fiat. They're going to have to get US dollars, which the seller will accept. So I think it's just, when you think of it that way, don't get so wrapped up in the blockchain and crypto and what does this mean? Like, look, just pretend that they have blocks of gold, bunch of gold, and they want to buy a house. Great, you have a lot of gold, sell the gold, get US dollars, let's buy the house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even if you're walking up with a bag of cash, right, unless you're in the islands, that's not going to work, right? So, right, makes perfect sense. Right. Cool. Well, let's transition a little bit. I actually think when I think about blockchain and real estate over the next 10 years, I think it's interesting to talk about Web3, and which is a term that I think fewer people even have some grip on, but that's where I think it starts getting really interesting, just this notion of overall decentralization. So can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Oh, man. Who wants to nerd out on that?
I'll nerd out because this is my big thing. So I've been starting doing the deep dive into this whole space in last year, right? And one of the things that I immediately took away was none of this is ready for prime time in real estate for, 3 to 5 years, right? There are lots of companies, a lot of really smart people working on problems, but it's just not real. It's not going to have a huge, giant impact in the near term. Having said that, in the long term, it is going to change everything. And I do think the way it's going to change is exactly what people talk about Web3. It's not that well defined, in my opinion, right now. But the central defining feature of Web3, when we think about it, is decentralization. Right? And that's going to pose a real challenge, I think, for real estate. So for example, just some of the assumptions that we make, like making sure that the real estate agent is at the center of the transaction, that's likely going to go away in a Web3 type environment, right? Which means they have to provide value in a different way. You're not going to be the gatekeeper anymore. You have to be an advisor. Things like the MLS. The MLS is a gatekeeper today. In a Web3 environment, that's probably going to go away. Brokerages, and so it's a lot of that. And I just don't know. There's a lot of hype and talk around Web3. I don't know from a broker agent standpoint, it's something necessarily you want to pay a whole lot of attention to. But it is something that leadership needs to pay attention to, right? It is something that MRED and the Nobu and the boards of directors, and those people need to pay attention to this in terms of what does this mean if things get decentralized. And we get into like real levels of detail, like the difference between permission private blockchain versus public blockchain. Like Toronto, Treb is implementing a blockchain solution in their MLS. You know what? It's a private blockchain. It's permission. They control it. So that's probably the first step. But when you think that's not Web3, that's not going all the way. We are going to have to someday go to some sort of public blockchain with all that means. And what does that signify? I think it's a little theoretical, frankly, to spend a lot of time talking about it. Again, unless we're talking to MLS board of directors, RESO, okay, then let's really get into it. I think for the average broker agent, it's not something that's going to be relevant for them for years.
Yeah, sure, but I think it's so cool to have this sort of encyclopedia here of like, here's all the terms, here's kind of what the state of it is. I was thinking of it right when we were about to start of like, this is going to be a fun time capsule to like listen to this conversation, 3 or 5 years from now, and what idiots we all were.
Of course.
But anyway, you got anybody else want to chime in on specifically on the Web3 piece?
I don't know, man. I think maybe it's like Liz and Kristen chiming in. But this is an ideological thing right now. I mean, look how well real estate has gone when data became public, right? At scale, right? So decentralization actually means a lot for not necessarily for the transaction, but for the gatekeepers themselves, the people that are holding up these silos that, frankly, in my mind, are ceasing to become relevant more and more. So, that's something that Chris and Liz and we're going to have to worry about as this evolves.
I think the best thing that we can do is educate our members on, again, how to be partners and advisors. Rob brought up in his paper that, maybe we won't have real estate agents be parts of the transaction. I think there absolutely need to be advisors, right? We see rug pulls happen every day in DeFi, and that's going to continue to happen. You need a trusted person, and we need trusted resources just in organized real estate today for members to start reading, because right now they're reading everything on Twitter and on Twitter, and people are like, well, you learn all of this from Discord and you lose a little money along the way. Well, why do we have to do that? We should be educating people just like we are today.
Yep.
I think the Venn diagram of decentralization and distribution is going to be really interesting to look at, especially in real estate over the next couple of years. I mean, obviously you can't do a panel these days without talking about how much things have changed over the last 2 years. And you see that especially in the MLS world and in the brokerage world, where everything's remote, everything's distributed. We've had technological gains and policy gains that have happened in 2 years that wouldn't have happened for 10 or 15 years otherwise. And when you look at something like decentralization with Web 3.0, and you look at how the MLS, is really about advocating for data quality, cooperation among the members. But then the biggest part of MLS that gets that data quality is the rules and the localization of the rules. And we have obviously organized bodies in real estate that's trying to standardize a lot of those, but it always comes back to, and I hate to use it because it's such a cliche at this point, but real estate's local, but local is a node. A node is one part of a blockchain, and that node has control over what happens in that specific area. And that's where it's good to standardize for a lot of efficiency gains, but that's where I see it's really interesting, and what MRED looks at here, and our CEO Rebecca Jensen's very interested in this area, is how does distribution and decentralization, how can that help make sure we ensure that local feel for real estate?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, guys, let's shift a little bit to NFTs, and that's arguably, from my vantage point, been the hottest buzzword in the last 90 days or something. And interesting that we're having this conversation today because of this property transaction happening in Florida literally today. That'll be the first recorded NFT transaction in the US that I know of. And we can talk about that because even that's a little bit of a, you have to go through, 17 steps to make that kind of true, but, and it's not, but it's a really interesting, one small leap kind of perspective of, hey, this is what this might begin to look like. So can you guys talk a little, and I think we do have to kind of talk about what's an NFT for a second as well. So who wants to jump on that?
Liz, take that one.
Well, I mean, an NFT stands for non-fungible token. And so, it goes back to the blockchain where the database agrees on what everybody has, but this is the token of that you own that says you own that piece. But as we've learned, with some stories about people stealing pictures of apes, those can still be stolen from your digital wallet. And then you go back to the immutable database that says, oh no, this is mine. And they throw up their hands and say, it's not. So I think there's still a lot of technology to be sorted out. If we can't figure it out with cartoons, we absolutely shouldn't be doing it with titles.
Yeah, I had a conversation with friends of mine who, Ryan Serhant was recently here in town. He actually was gone on record by saying, half of all real estate transactions will be cryptoed. And I agree with him. And these are the people, like he's dealing with people who've got a lot of FU money, to put it bluntly, right? These are the people that by and large, they're out there, part of the folks that they're spending $100 million on houses. If you ever wondered who these people are, it's usually the same types of folks who are doing this kind of thing. So it's a people overlap right now in my mind, right? So you've got these folks who are dabbling in it. Some people are actually making money. I put that in quotes because they're cashing out at the right time, or they're mining it, right? And buying, whether it's a online digital property or it's an offline real world property after a cash out. So this is where, to me, it's like we, as real estate people, we need to fully understand what our clients are doing. Let's be a little more consumer centric, especially if you're dealing with that upper crust, upper bracket buyer and seller, because I can guarantee you they're looking at it now. 1% of every one of my wife's commissions goes towards crypto. She just texted me saying that right now. She's on this thing right now. So it's like, it's more than a dabble for her. She's reading Rob's thing and chimes in every time Rob mentions.
Just 1%.
Hey, that's going to send your kid to college, Nobu.
Yeah,
I know. I don't know. I mean, I think the NFT thing is a bit of a real bubble and hype right now. And it's mostly because there's just huge dollars attached to it. I'm like, yeah, but you're talking about the art world. And the art world is crazy and insane to begin with. I mean, I wrote a post about this where you're talking about collectibles. And I mean, collectors are insane people. It's like, I have a magic card that's probably worth $18,000, or I had one. It's like, that's crazy. It's a piece of cardboard, but you're a collector, so you're willing to pay. I do feel like once we get away from the insane people who just want to spend money because whatever.
Got it.
Then the real practical aspects of it, and this is where we're seeing like Proppy, and when we're seeing the real action in real estate, is all that it means is it's just a digital proof that you own something, right? Here's the problem. Like, if we're really going to get into this conversation, then we have to start talking about what does ownership mean, right? And I don't think this is the webinar where we want to do that. So for our purpose, it just says, look, you own this thing, whatever this thing is. For houses, the problem is title is what says you own that property. And we're not there yet. Cook County, with the experiment that they did, until we have that, I think at the governmental level with the legal system, it's really still, to me, a bit of a novelty, right? And yeah, it's cool that like, we're going to take a trust and then, tokenize the ownership of the trust, or we're going to tokenize ownership of the LLC. It's all cool. And I'm glad that companies are really working on it. I don't see the real applicability to real estate right now, right? Now, here's the interesting thing. Where we might see more applicability of something like NFT will be things like membership in MLS, right? Like right now, how do you signify that I belong to this MLS, right? Like maybe that should just be a token. It's an NFT in my wallet that's automatic. So I don't have to log in. So imagine this, you never have to log into an MLS, right? You just have the membership NFT in your wallet and the website knows it. So it just automatically logs me in. Something like that might be where we see real applicability in our space, like in the near future,
And even that example has huge benefits to the MLS because that takes a lot of the security measures out of it. You're not having to worry about sharing passwords anymore because that token is yours, and you're not going to be sharing tokens because they're going to have access to a lot of other information that you wouldn't want them to have access to.
And good God, it's updated all the time. So it's not, I don't have to email you people. Never you email me back about your updated information, all that other stuff. That to me is the best part of it. It's real time identification, right? In an almost anonymous way.
Just think about how everyone's NFT headshot as a realtor will be current and can't be 10 years old and all that.
That might be a negative, right? But I mean, Matt, look, you run events, you know. Imagine where you're selling tickets and all that. Look, it's the tickets and NFT, and when you show up, all you have to do is show your wallet with the NFT in it, and that's how we're going to see this, I think, happen sort of practically and pragmatically in the near term. In the long term, I agree with some of the comments. In the long term, once we have more stability, government regulations, some smart counties and towns start realizing we just should put title in the blockchain and, tokenized title. Yeah, a lot of this is going to really transform. But in the near term, again, next 3 to 5 years, I just don't see it being that relevant.
Yeah.
But,
well, I think I equate it for all of us that are old enough to have, been around the first time listings went on the internet. I feel like we're at the precipice of that same, understanding. Like, hey, look, this is going to happen. So just know what the heck is going on, have some sense of where it is, and follow it over the next 5 years as it progresses. But the notion that it won't happen for most properties to be have some kind of NFT element and tokenization, that's where I think this conversation is really helpful to the average realtor.
And I think it's something to realize. And I think Chris, I know Liz and you see this data every day. The fundamentals, the foundation for this is already there. It's just a matter of who's going to go and standardize it, what that standard is going to actually be. I mean, I remember the first time when the web went online and people are seeing property ID numbers for the first time. It was blowing a lot of people's minds when they first saw that when they're purchasing a home through the MLS. Like, yeah, every property is got an ID on it, so we can tax you. Like, somebody can tax you on the thing. Same thing is happening here, right? So it's just a matter of that shift. And I think it's going to be a leap forward, frankly. I think once it's figured out, it'll be a huge leap forward rather than this slow crawl, which we're at right now.
Well, and this is where, the work that Rezo's doing has made everything easier. Implementing any new technology at an MLS today is 20 times faster, if not even more, than it was 5 years ago before all of this data was standardized. So the more that standardization can happen, the easier it's going to be that whatever the next neat, cool, shiny thing is, whether it's something we've never heard of or we decide that NFTs are the way to go, we're ready to go and we're not waiting and lagging behind, which is what everyone has accused us of forever.
Yep.
So here's the thing about it. I'm going to bring it back to the decentralization topic real quick, right? And I'll give you two scenarios of things to think about. One which will make realtors really happy, and the other one which might make them really not happy. One that might make them happy is in a decentralized world, Web3 world. I don't know that there's a website called Zillow that exists, right? Because it's all decentralized, where each listing would just belong to each agent's, you know what I mean? Like, and it'll happen that way. The decentralized, on the negative side is, it's not clear to me that there would be such a thing as an MLS, right? In that sort of fully decentralized world. So when you think about what this means, I think Rezo does great work, but in a fully decentralized world, it's not about what, a group of people get together and decide. It's about what the overall community accepts. And I think that's going to be a transition that's going to be really chaotic and really difficult for our industry very specifically. And I don't know that, again, this doesn't impact brokers and agents on the ground in the next 3 to 5 years, but this is going to be real interesting.
Maybe Rob, and this is something I was going to piggyback on that too. It's like, and maybe this is for Chris and Liz. To me, the MLS vendor, that's that point where it's like, holy shit, then things can change, right? You decentralized world, now you've got a bigger potential vendor pool. And I think that'll drive innovation. I don't know. You guys are running MLSs directly. What do you thoughts on that?
I think from driving adoption of anything, it has to be convenient and easy. And right now, decentralization is not convenient or easy. And one of the reasons why the MLS works the way it does is because as agents, you have one place to go to look at all the listings in your market. And as a consumer, you can go to one place that you choose to go look at all the listings in a market. So just because you can decentralize something doesn't always mean you should. So to Rob's point,
Agreed.
that I'm not entirely sure that that's the direction it has to go. And like, I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat about agents become obsolete. The reality is, like, we've had listings on the internet for 20 years and we still have a small fraction of consumers who want to do it on their own. They're still asking agents to help them with that. And if you're an agent with the expertise and the knowledge to help them navigate whatever the next step is, if it's decentralization, they're still going to pay you to do it because it's going to be more convenient for them, because it's going to be that matter of time versus money. And that's really what it always comes back to. And I think that, from an MLS perspective, there's a lot with blockchain and Web 3.0 we can do to make things easier for our subscribers and for the customers they work with. But I also don't think we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater just because we want to hop onto decentralization. There's a lot that has to be kept with the current model.
So let's if we look into Rob's crystal ball and we all buy into it, that the MLS goes away and Zillow goes away, and every agent or broker, if there are brokers, or the consumer lists their own transaction, right? And they throw it out into whatever Web 3.0 is, or into the metaverse. Some tool still needs to search it, right? If I go on the dark web, I still need a search engine to search whatever is out there. So those type of tools are still going to be there. How they work, how they're monetized, who runs them. Those are the questions I think that will be out there. And as we've seen with the ones that have risen to the top over the last 10 years, it is, as Chris said, the least amount of friction, the easiest to use, the most consumer friendly, the most agent friendly, or the cheapest, or any combination of those.
Yep. And
guys, I want to pull you guys back in a couple other directions, because and I also want to ask for another hour bundling, if we can just do that. But I want to talk about security, because I think in the sort of practical, how does this affect people world? Chris and I were talking about passwords and wallets and all that kind of stuff, and how all of us little American consumers are used to password protection and the ability to recover your password, and bank, the FDIC backing our deposits, and all these safeties that go out the window when you cross over into a crypto NFT world. And I was relating the story that I was given some tokens as a gift by a company that I had invested in, and created a wallet and never even tried to remember the password, and lost that investment. Well, not the investment, but just the gift. So it was like an inexpensive lesson in a whole new world. And you hear these stories about people losing millions of dollars because the password's gone, or it doesn't exist. And so I want you guys to talk about the security piece and what that's going to look like in the next 5 years.
Security's broken. Securities are broken. Passwords are obsolete. Single link, single click authentication, I think, is probably the best way to go, with a 2-factor attached to it, and attached to the email or text that you're getting it to. You should be using a standalone app and not text, because we all know that there can be intermediaries put into your wireless system or into your cell phone. Security is a mess. Use unique passwords everywhere. Use a password vault. I mean, I talk about it all the time. It's a mess.
Yeah, and I do see there's some opportunity out there. You've got some really cool people working on, like Glenn, formerly of Cardivi and DocuSign, is now working on Presidio, which is securing paper, right, in the digital world. Which is like, when you think about it, like right now, all you realtors on this chat, you guys get you get a thick thing of docs that has to be in paper form. Like, I see innovators like that really kind of shifting their business models over, because at the end of the day, it really isn't about technology, it's about the human beings attached to that technology, because they're fallible, and they're that weak point. And you take the humanity out of security aspect, I think that's when you start seeing things get real. But I'll be watching. In my mind, that's the first thing that'll go, because you're going to need to see existing institutions partner up with companies that can do digital and online security really, really well, take the humanity out of it in a certain extent, while ensuring that the data is still viable and accurate. So that's what I'm watching in my mind.
I mean, I think that we're starting to see some generational shifts, right? The boomers are definitely starting to, how can I politely say, age out. And having that type of a vault for that type of an information, anybody who's had to deal with a family tragedy and figure all that out really quickly knows how valuable a tool like that will be. And the demographics alone tell me that that product will absolutely be successful.
Rob, you want to chime on this?
Not on security. Like, I figure it's going to get fixed. The only comment I'll make is, as far as I know, neither Bitcoin nor Ethereum blockchain or Solana have ever been hacked. Apps and protocols on those blockchains have been hacked. The blockchain has never been hacked. And it's just still relying on, pretty good encryption, PGP, public keys, things of that nature. Until we get to quantum computing, it's unhackable. But at the same time, it's annoying as piss, to deal with that security. So there's always going to be this trade-off between security and, usability. People are going to figure that out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's. We only have a couple minutes left, and before we shift to specifically to Q&A, I want to talk about Meta and Metaverse. And again, it's only been a few months since Facebook made that change. I think it was a really interesting change because now it feels like there is this. They've sort of claimed the namespace of that, which is really interesting. And so, but can you guys talk about what the heck is Metaverse? How does Facebook play into it, and all that?
Well, it didn't help their stock price, because once everyone realized that they were losing users, that's where all the money is. Between that and the Apple advertising, Facebook's not in a great place right now. But the metaverse is very interesting, and I don't think Facebook owns that space. By no means does it. And again,
I guess I meant in the consumer mind of that they're already going to sort of blend. Oh, metaverse, that's that.
Right. Rob wrote a great paper on this, about where everybody, we're already in it. We're already using it. It's just a matter of what you call it today.
This is the metaverse right now. Yeah. We're all looking at each other's faces.
I mean, my kid knows how to purchase stuff in the games that he plays on his iPad, right? Digital currency, the digital things that he's buying with real world currency. This really isn't about us. This is about our kids, man, especially in that metaverse, living that life where they can go and play video games with their buddies. My kid's 5. He's already doing this now, fully digital, right? And he knows how to use, he knows how to use my Apple ID and password to get that stuff, because we're sharing that iPad. So I don't think this is about us. This is about our kids going forward. Their future is out there. People are mentioning things like Google in there. I think it's going to be interesting to see where these institutional companies go, and Facebook is one of those people. You're exactly right. People mentioning Google's looking into it. Conversations that I've had with those guys is immense. And when it comes to education, by the way, Matt, watch out what people are doing in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. There's some legislators there that are putting together a crypto show, because there's so much of their people who live there have a high net worth, are investing their money into it. So I think go out and see these regulators try to put on these shows and and see what they can do with this education stuff.
Yeah. I mean, Sharon brings up a good point. We can't talk about the metaverse and real estate without talking about EXP. I mean, they really brought it in with Verbella, and it's been very successful for them. It's very sticky. They've made it really easy for agents to work and easy for agents to make a lot of money.
Yep.
Yeah, it seemed like such a crazy thing 10 years ago, and now it's like, bam, congrats to Glenn Sanford.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what's interesting to me about the metaverse, it kind of goes back to, I know we got away from the topic, but ownership. We're in a subscription economy right now where you really don't own anything anymore. Like any music you buy online, any movies you buy online, if that company goes away or decides to change their terms of service, you no longer have that anymore. And I wonder how much of the metaverse and where that could potentially evolve becomes a backlash to that loss of control and loss of ownership. And does that have direct correlation with real estate? Maybe, not yet, but I do think that's a really interesting question for a lot of people to consider is, what do you really own today and what do you really want to own in the future? And how are you actually going to be able to own that if it's digital?
Along with privacy, you have no privacy there because this is all run by big companies. And so if you don't think that they're data mining about you, no one's read the terms of service because they're too long. And you wouldn't do anything if you read every piece of terms of service that you agreed to in your life. Everybody knows.
And I think to go on to Chris's point too, it's like you got to think about utility, right? So like my kids they have no problem spending $20 on a video game thing that they purchase within their game, but a house is a very different thing. You're living in that thing; it's tangible, right? And I think that, again, this is a human conversation we're having here in a very transactional world. I think that's the biggest thing. I can't remember what I own on my iTunes anymore. That's the thing is worrisome to me. But I know when I own my house, and I got 4 of them.
Well, and the more we go virtual, the less you have privacy. And going back to the hacking thing, like, I think the best thing you can do to protect yourself from hacking is just to assume you're going to get hacked. You're going to have your identity stolen multiple times. You're going to have money stolen from you. The only thing you can really do to safeguard is just monitor constantly, because there is never going to, I mean, to Rob's point, blockchain is very secure right now, but eventually someone's going to crack that even, and they're going to figure out a way to crack that, because it always ends up, you always find the loopholes. Like that's something we always talk about, right? No matter what set of rules are out there, someone's always going to find the loophole. And that's, so all you can really do is monitor and just understand that it's going to happen to you, and how do you mitigate the risk when it actually happens.
Yeah, I think security is kind of a misnomer with this. I think where all of this is at is removing friction from very complicated transactions between people and things.
I think the big thing to think about with metaverse for us, again, for real estate brokers and agents is, and EXP has really shown the way, right? We're all going to be working. That is the future of the office. And for real estate, what makes that interesting is it's not clear to me what happens to independent brokerages, right? Because the whole value of, local, like we all know each other, 7 of us in this whatever town. I don't know if that survives, I guess, in the full on metaverse. I mean, you could have clans, you could have little small groups, but the advantage of having this giant network, with no cost or very little cost could be enormous. And I'm still thinking that through. Like, is the future of residential real estate essentially like 10 firms?
Mm-hmm.
With
you can't
a
get away
gazillion
from
teams or
right?
What?
You can't get away from the localization. I had a conversation today about property management, and there's some big players in the property management space, but they're not actually keeping people in the local spaces. And then, okay, well, when the toilet breaks or somebody needs to knock on the door, that doesn't change. And so, it's certainly going to move it, but there's still, you can't seem to ever get away from that local, hyper local expert language. The head count goes down, but somebody's got to be on the ground ultimately.
Sure.
It's the last mile until robots can come and unclog the toilet, and flip the circuit breaker for you. It's the last mile.
But the thing is about property management, you're right. The property manager is local, but a lot of the more successful property management firms I know, their entire support staff is in Mexico and the Philippines. Mm-hmm. Right. So you're right. Local brokerage, the local agent who really knows the local market. Absolutely. Totally agreed. But does a transaction coordinator have to live in that town? Can the transaction coordinator be in the metaverse? Right. So it's that sort of thing. So I'm not saying independent brokers are doomed. I'm saying when I think about the metaverse and what it does from an office standpoint, right? When you get rid of this physical location where I go to, and our routine becomes I just log into the metaverse and I show up at my virtual office in the metaverse. I don't know, right? I don't know what that means. That's all.
It's decentralization of people-centric constructs. Like I think about our DC meetings that we have every year. Fortnite regularly has virtual concerts by name brand people, name brand artists. And they get 16, 20, I think there was a high of 34 million kids going on and watching a virtual concert in Fortnite.
Right.
And I look at it going, there's never been removing all the friction. There's never been a better time to decentralize advocacy, right? If I can go and do a virtual meeting with my regulators and legislators and bring constituents to them directly 24/7 in a virtual environment, I love that idea. And I think that's where you'll see, at least in my world, this association nonprofit world where advocacy and property rights is the thing. I see a lot of benefit for that, especially as our realtors hopefully get younger.
So Nobu, during COVID, were you able to host virtual advocacy meetings with your local representation?
Monthly. We actually had better turnout because these guys aren't sitting in a car for a half an hour getting to our meeting place and then another half an hour getting home. Denver traffic is like Chicago traffic, everybody, and it's back, right? So we get regularly, we would fight with one local county commissioner just to get him in place. We get 2 to 3 now per meeting, which is amazing. I've got 11 counties here that I've got to deal with. I'm the size of a state, and this Zoom world has been awesome for that.
That's great.
Hey guys, thanks everybody for keeping so lively in the chat, and keep the questions coming. And if we didn't hit your question yet, maybe go ahead and repost it. And we're gonna keep plugging along because we've been, hammering on the questions in the chat all throughout. We've got about 8 minutes left, which is crazy. We could definitely do this all day long. But I want to throw a question at everybody. But Rob, this is a little bit pointed at you. Talking about what the brokerage becomes. And so I want to introduce one more buzzword, and that's DAO. And so I want you to chime in a little bit about what's a DAO, and specifically, I guess I was thinking, what if that's the future of brokerage?
So I'm investigating DAOs very, very actively right now. But let me preface this by making a general statement, right? Which is I was around for .com 1.0, as were some of us. Nobu's probably too young because he's a young man. But you know what I mean? Like, let's put it this way. And every technology does this, right? Brand new technology comes along. And what we do as human beings is we look at what we have today and then sort of port that over to the new technology, right? So the very first websites were basically like magazines put online. I don't think in 2000, any of us could have predicted Facebook. I don't like social media. I don't think any of us could have predicted, or some of us, but that's how it goes. So I think with respect to this, the first wave of things we're going to see over the next 3 to 5, 10 years are going to be stuff in the Web 2 world that we're in right now, kind of translated and into this new world, and sort of that way. But the real disruption will come when whatever is native to this technology comes in. DAO might be one of those things, right? So brokerage is one thing. I'm actually looking at going, why does NAR have a board of directors, right? Why can't you just have governance tokens and have all the members vote, right? Why doesn't MLS have a board of directors? A lot of the institutions we have today in 2000 or 2022 were built in a centralized world, right? Where the internet, the websites, everything's better when it's centralized. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. Like, I'm not saying next year this is all going to change. No. But I do think about as we're in the very early stages of this technology and what the implications are for society, for culture, for everything else. DAO's one of those big ones. I don't know that it's going to work. I mean, there are some prominent DAOs on in the DeFi world, and a lot of them have resulted in people losing a shitload of money. Like lots of rug pulls, lots of real scumbags, lots of that kind of stuff. So I don't know that that's necessarily the future, but it does raise the question of, if you are an MLS leadership, if you're an association leadership, if you're a broker, right? What does DAO governance maybe look like then for your organization? I don't know, but it's something that I don't think is those conversations are not necessarily happening today. And again, I don't know that this is the group to have the conversation, but something like Nobu and Liz and Chris and y'all need to have those conversations with some of your folks. That's how I look at it.
I feel like we got close enough to the end. I figured we could go full nerd for just a second. But Liz and Chris and Nobu, I want to hear your thoughts about that. DAO as the future of brokerage or association or whatever.
I mean, at the association level, if we could get the level of engagement that we would need for that to be some sort of fair assessment of what the members wanted, I think that would be great. But member engagement, I mean, I wish we had every member engaged. I think every association does, but we don't. That's not. It's an afterthought. Until there's actual skin in the game and thought cycles in the game, I don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, I see DAO as a way to democratize engagement, because there's frankly, you got all these people here, they'd rather be here rather than sitting in an NAR board of director meeting. And I think that's one of the things that Rob is talking about here. The thing I think about when it comes to autonomous innovation in general is that we have so much data between the association and the MLS world. Like, I look at productivity data as being a driver on how I'm going to engage with people and what to actually automate. I think there's a lot of potential in that. But again, this is too early. We're driven. This is a very egocentric industry. And I think that's the problem that we've got here more than anything is once you got people who don't give two craps about their ego being stroked on a stage and more about how we can get more business done better by even less people. I think that's where that ideological shift needs to happen because I'm all for that. I would love to be able to automate engagement so at least I know what people are thinking at any given time and why, right? Based on the productivity that we can pipe into this if we work closer together and with brokerages, frankly, because I can relay that to brokerages as well. So there is some value in that if we think about it as a flat and democratic way versus versus how do we make top down better? Because I don't think that's ever going to work ever again.
Yep. Hey guys, I've been throwing some links in the chat. People have been asking, like how do I get more info, what to follow, and there's not a ton of stuff out there, but Rob's blog is obviously really useful. notoriousrob.com. I posted that, and you got to come to that with a full cup of coffee. I'm going to tell you, but that's good stuff. And then a couple of newsletters I've found recently, Morning Brew and a couple others that are great. So panelists and others, if you have, resources you can throw in the chat or mention for people to kind of tune in deeper. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Let me make one last point. I think there's a generational thing going on here as well, right? And as Nobu mentioned, but the average age of a realtor in North America, I think, is 58. Is that about right?
Yep.
So they're, pretty like early boomer, late Gen X. The millennials, 50% of millennial men have crypto. 20% of millennial women have crypto. 61% of millennials that make over 100,000 have crypto. And a lot of the even younger generations are even more into this technology. I think as some of those younger realtors get into the leadership roles more into the industry. And as Liz so nicely put it, as the boomers age out, we could see some real changes, right? That the current generation of leaders, brokers, executives, like, I don't know if they're going to be ready for that generational shift. So it's just something to think about. Not anytime soon. I'm going to stress this again. Yes, get involved with it. If you have, clients who have crypto, nothing's really going to change overnight, but it is something to just pay attention to. And if you're in leadership, you absolutely got to think about this stuff.
Yeah. Hey guys, guess what? We wrapped this whole hour, believe it or not. But I want to give everybody 30-second closing shot, starting with Liz.
Don't be afraid to learn, read everything that you can, but take it all with a grain of salt and verify anything before you start to put your money in it.
Cool. Chris?
I would say when you're looking at all these new technologies, the one question you always have to ask yourself as a real estate agent is, why will this help my consumer? If you can figure out what the benefit is to them, you're going to understand how that's going to be important to you and how to use it.
Awesome. Nobu?
I think for me, it's this is actually a great time in this business, in this time with socioeconomic issues. This is a great time to feel dumb. Like constantly try to feel dumb around people that are way smarter than you to get better in your business, to get better in your business processes, and don't discount the institutions that are out there. People like Liz and people like Chris are my heroes. I look up at them and we nerd out about things and. I strive to feel constantly dumb around these people so I can learn how to ask better questions. And then we got to do that as an industry.
Yeah. All right, Rob. Well, you kind of were parting shot, but parting shot from you.
I kind of did it. I think generational shift.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks Bondolin and everybody at Elm Street for putting this together. It was super fun, and I get the feeling we need to do some more of this. And thanks to everybody this was a super lively chat. It's like I can't even keep up with reading it.
You guys are crazy in the chat.
Yeah, no doubt. But anyway, thanks everybody. I promise we'll be doing this again soon.
Thanks everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you.